at any point of time during the session. You don't need to wait till the end. So let's get on with it then. So the session is called the entrepreneurship, the what, how, and why. That means we are trying to establish, first of all, what is entrepreneurship, how it takes place within a variety of environments, and why it is important for a business school student to imbibe some of the entrepreneurial traits into their personalities. So the agenda is going to be like this. We're going to briefly talk about what it means to have an entrepreneurial mindset. Then we are going to go and progress to understanding what are the triggers for entrepreneurship. So what causes people to take entrepreneurship as an option in their careers? Then we'll talk about entrepreneurship from the explosive startup mania that we are seeing in India. But we'll go much beyond that, and we'll see entrepreneurship that has always taken shape in India for centuries through family businesses, right? And also more recently in the corporate context. So there we will try and establish that entrepreneurship is not just about starting a business, but it is actually about, you can demonstrate entrepreneurship in any context. You can demonstrate it in a SME, in a large corporation, anywhere. And then we'll end by talking a little bit about how you can develop entrepreneurial traits and behaviors at IMT Ghaziabad during your 2-year journey with us. Okay. So the first thing I would like to really clarify is that as someone who has done his PhD in family business strategy and entrepreneurship, there is no universal definition of entrepreneurship. Okay. As academics, we really like to include definitions. But the strange thing is that for entrepreneurship, there is no universal definition. That means in different parts of the world, people cannot agree what entrepreneurship should look like. So that's why I did not include an entrepreneurship definition. So rather what we'll try to do is try and have a dialogue about what we think is entrepreneurship. Okay. So what, according to you, is an entrepreneur's mindset? Let me throw the question to you. What do you think is an entrepreneurial mindset? You can just enable your mic and speak.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I feel proactiveness and the ability to be able to solve your problems on your own, taking ownership of your work instead of waiting for someone to tell you what to do. You just have to go ahead, get your work done by hook or by crook. And whatever results you desire, you want to achieve them. That's what.
Very good. Excellent. And I've just noted down the 3 keywords that you've used. One is proactiveness. That means, yes, you should be self-motivated. You should be self-driven, not waiting for somebody to come and tell you something. You should find that way yourself. Second, that continues to touch upon initiative. So entrepreneurs are some people who take initiative, right? Whether it is about finding a gap within the market and plugging that gap with a product, service, whatever it may be. So that is the second trait. Yes, proactiveness, initiative. And the third thing, what you mentioned is quite interesting, is entrepreneurs have to be problem solvers, right? So when you create a product or a service, basically what you're trying to create is value. And how can you create value if you don't solve the problems that the consumers or other stakeholders may be facing? So very good. Thank you very much for that, Varun. Anybody else would like to add to it?
So I would like to add that entrepreneur should be a good leader. If he's not able to motivate his employees, if he's not able to, through his communication skills, able to implement his ideas to their employees, he will not be able to achieve success. As well as he should be a good strategist. He should know all his policies need to be driven when. I think he should be a good strategy maker, and he should be at least very innovative, because if he is able to understand its clients' problems and how to deal with them, I think that's the main point of being entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And you've got it spot on again. A good leader, and when you said a good leader, you mentioned communication. So absolutely, communication is extremely important for an entrepreneur. He needs to communicate not only his ideas, he needs to communicate in order to motivate his team and keep them on their feet. He needs to be a good strategist. That's another good point, because strategy is something that the owner manager of the firm develops. and to translate this strategy into action plans, which everybody within the organization sort of believes in and puts into action. The leader has to be very good in communication. And the third thing you mentioned was innovation. Yes, absolutely. Some of the freshest ideas must come from the entrepreneur's mind. And usually they are the ones, if they are leaders, then obviously their followers will look up to them or look at them for solutions, for vision, for getting an idea of where this particular person is going to take them and this organization. So extremely good. Okay, thank you,
Thanks.
Vihan. Anybody else?
Hello, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, Aishwarya.
Yeah, good evening, sir. So the entrepreneur should have the mindset to manage all the aspects of the business. Like he can't say that I'm good at finance, I'm only going to look at finance. He should be able to look into all aspects, like all departments, all functions, and he should also be a risk taker.
No, extremely good points. Cross-functional. I think you've got that, very well identified. Something that we expect not only good entrepreneurs but good leaders to do. To have that understanding of how the different functional areas of the business interact with each other, and why it is important that the decisions taken by the individual functional areas of the business are aligned to the strategy of the organization. So yes, they need to have a cross-functional understanding rather than a deep understanding of one particular area. And the second is risk-taking. This is the most commonly associated trait with entrepreneurs, that they have to be risk takers. However, in our session today, we will try and delve a little bit more into this risk-taking, because sometimes taking risks, what kind of risks, what should be the likelihood and impact of these risks? Sometimes that is misunderstood. Sometimes in the broad media, entrepreneurs are always painted as heroes, somebody who went against the odd and, achieved marvelous things. But is that really what happens? Or are they cautious risk takers? Or they are able to take risks because they can see something more clearly that others do not. So we'll try and delve into that. So thank you very much, and I'll bring more people in as we progress. But it's a good thing that, everybody has started getting involved from the very beginning. So you said that, problem-solving initiative, proactiveness, leadership, strategic thinking, innovativeness, cross-functional knowledge, and risk-taking was some of the key aspects of entrepreneurial's mindset, right? Let's see what the theory says. Yeah, you must believe now that a lot of things that you said are going to fit into these 6 points that theory talks about. So they see and create opportunities, right? And that is what the first gentleman talked about. It proactively seeking opportunities, not resting back and just doing what is expected of them, in a day-to-day life. Always being in a seeking mindset, always trying to look for opportunities or even create opportunities if there are not many that are available to you out there. Second is they turn ideas into action. That means they are people who are not just strategic thinkers, but they are very good at implementation of strategy. See, strategy can look great on paper, but it's only as great as the person who implements it or executes that strategy, right? So they understand that it is important to turn the ideas into actions and clearly communicate to the rest within the team that what actions they have to take in order to achieve their goal, right? And they lead. So you absolutely said leadership. So leadership and delegation, engaging the employees, communicating with others. This is absolutely an important trait to have. They also use resources very smartly, okay? So when I say using resources smartly, that means they know how to optimize whatever is available to them, right? And they develop a culture of innovation. They like people who think outside the box rather than just say yes to everything that they're saying. They encourage people who critique them. So this is a very important thing to realize about entrepreneurs, is that they do not like yes men or yes women. They like people who critique them, because that is the testing of their idea. So before you go out into the market and fail, entrepreneurs always like to fail first or fail fast, because they want their ideas to be challenged internally before investing massive amount of resources and taking them to market. They also manage risk, which you just now said. So When we say risk, instead of saying risk taking, it's about managing risk. So you don't celebrate a risk averse culture, but you encourage people to learn from their failure. So in the past, there has always been a culture in India wherein we say that failure is not something that we are able to digest, and a lot of it is because of the social conditioning that we have had growing on, right? Wherein failure is always viewed as negative, and there's a stigma attached to it. However, good entrepreneurs always learn from their failure because there's always a lesson to be derived from that. And that also builds resilience in the sense they are more likely to succeed in the barriers that they encounter in life, because they have developed that resilience, that attitude of not giving up just because there are some constraints that they face in their business. And lastly, they collaborate. So collaboration is something that is extremely important, because they don't only have to collaborate internally with employees, they might have to collaborate with their investors, with their suppliers, a lot of times with the customers, with the government. So you need to understand that it is important to collaborate. You cannot work in silos. You cannot be a person who is always going to be like, okay, this, I need to do this, and I trust only myself to do this. You should be comfortable to delegate. You should be open to collaborating and, onboarding people who you think will add more value to you. So a lot of times you will see that good entrepreneurs will actually surround themselves with people who are much smarter than them. The next question I want to ask, so I hope you've gotten an understanding of what is an entrepreneur's mindset. So it's not too different from what you guys are already telling me. Now, let's try and understand what do you think triggers entrepreneurship? So if anybody would like to contribute, just put on your mic, go ahead and speak, please.
Hi, sir. Good evening. This is Rishi.
Yeah, Rishi.
I guess the need of the hour or the need of a mass of people triggers entrepreneurship.
Need of people. Very good. Very good. So they see something within the society. There's a gap, and that is where they try and fill it with entrepreneurship. Very good. Anybody else?
So I personally feel the greatest entrepreneurship trigger is some situation that we have faced on our own. It may be a problem, it may be a realization, it can be anything, but something that you have faced personally that triggers entrepreneurship spirit the most inside of us.
Very good. Very good. Very interesting. Yes, thank you, Varun. Anybody else?
Sir, I would agree with Varun. Observant behavior that comes from an individual gives you a great source of being an entrepreneur.
Observation, very important. And when you probably, if you do land up at IMT Ghaziabad, there's a course that we do on design thinking, wherein we emphasize more and more on observing, and listening intently to your stakeholders. I think that is a very good point actually that you've made, Gaurav. Thank you for that. Somebody else also
the ability to achieve their goals. If you're given some goals to achieve some targets, then you will be able to hold the authority to reach towards those goals. So I think so when you're given set of goals, you become an entrepreneur.
So, classmate. Yeah. So I would like to really twist that a little bit, because you said achieve the goal, right? I would like to just change it a little bit and say, actually, it is a need for achievement.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right? If I say that, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, good. So need for achievement.
So I can also give an example. Like I was a coordinator at my TEDx. So actually my senior was little hospitalized due to some accident or something. So I was given the responsibility of selling the tickets. So sir, it was my authority to use public relation and social media to sell the tickets. So it was the goals and the authority that I was given which triggers entrepreneurship towards me. So I was the person who drove all the public relation team and all the social media engagement.
Excellent. So you have demonstrated responsibility and initiative, so some of that proactiveness that we were talking about is something that you've already demonstrated. And that is true for a lot of people who would have worked in organizations before joining us. And it is also true for a lot of people who will have not worked. Okay, so you would have probably demonstrated entrepreneurial tendencies in your college. And we'll talk about it a little bit more. But thank you. So moving on, let's see what the theory says. So I hope you understand what we are trying to do. I'm trying to get your understanding about something and then bringing in theory to see, wait, are we really talking about the same thing? Or what does the book talk about? Or, are we on two different ends of the continuum? So here, again, you would like to be very surprised by saying that, yes, you guys are not too far off the mark. Because what triggers entrepreneurship is, as somebody said, it is the prior experience that you must have gained from work. You must have seen that, okay, my company is doing it this way, but actually there's a better way of doing it. And, that can be a trigger of entrepreneurship. Second is you might have got a very deep knowledge about an industry or, a particular knowledge about markets or customers' problems because you have been very empathetical to the needs of the industry and the customers, and you have developed problem statements which you have tested and verified that they exist. And that can trigger entrepreneurship because then that need for achievement comes, which says that, yes, I need to go and do something about this. Some of you all might be actually triggered because, you have access to entrepreneurial networks. A lot of people that I studied during my doctorate, most of those people were triggered towards entrepreneurship because they came from a community of entrepreneurs. They always, so even if you would go to a marriage function, everybody would talk about their business. And even on the dinner table, most of the conversations would, revolve around business. Most of the people that they met were entrepreneurs. So that became their innate quality that, they were inspired by the people that they met and they know to take up entrepreneurship. Sometimes the need for achievement may come because of scarcity. You may not have, for example, very good family or household income. So a poverty or lack of, financial resources can also become a very, very strong, trigger for entrepreneurship. That, yes, I'm not going to be just satisfied by value X that is going to be deposited into my account at the end of the month. I want to determine my own trajectory, and I'm confident enough to do that. So you really back yourself to actually, change the situation of financial situation in your family. And believe it or not, in India, although we don't see this happen at the very top level, but we do see a lot of the bottom of the pyramid entrepreneurship that happens actually happens because of this particular trigger. And then, sometimes it may be things like influence of your peers, not having a good paying job. You might want to just call it quits and, might as well go towards your own business. So you may have any or a couple of these triggers yourself, but this is just for us to understand that why is it that certain people get into entrepreneurship. So it's not just because they don't like to do a 9-to-5 job. It's because they may have landed up in a situation that has pushed them towards doing something on their own. So in short, the triggers can be either opportunity based or needs based. So either you see an opportunity that nobody else has seen within the market and you start up, or you have needs. That means you have a need for achievement or need for a social recognition or the need to change your economic reality. And then that becomes the motivation for you to pursue entrepreneurship. So these are some of the triggers that the book talks about. So let's come to the startup mania, right? Because a lot of people must have associated entrepreneurship with startup. I mean, what are your thoughts? You think entrepreneurship is just restrictive to startups, or do you think entrepreneurship can happen anywhere else? Yeah, go on. So you are inaudible. I'm sorry, but we are not able to hear you clearly. So I would just request that you try and get a better connection, and then we can perhaps come back to you, Siddhant.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, I feel that if an individual decides to risk his own capital or put his own money and do something, even if it's a small scale thing, it's part of an entrepreneur. He becomes an entrepreneur, even if he's the only guy selling.
Very good. Very good.
Pani puri wala or chai wala, they are all entrepreneurs.
Yes, and nowadays you have the MBA chai wala as well. So
Sir,
Yeah, go on.
Yes, so entrepreneurship is like how you deal with your problems and how you face your challenges and overcome them. So it can be with any manager, any employee, even in the small part of the company.
Very good. So I'm seeing now two perspectives emerge. One is that startups, it is not necessarily for you to start a new venture in order to be an entrepreneur, right? You can do it in an organizational context, in a corporate context, very good. And at the same time, the other view that has emerged is that startup does not necessarily mean venture capital, investment, angel investor, raising huge amounts of money, unicorn and all of that, but even small or micro businesses, that also constitutes as an entrepreneurial venture. So in fact, a lot of the bottom of the pyramid business that we see, it is driven by entrepreneurs, right? But they are much more on a smaller scale, perhaps not as much talked about in the mainstream literature or mainstream media as we would have liked to. But that does not mean that what they are doing is different to what the startups at a much more higher level or scale are doing, right? So let's look at what has happened in India in the last 10 to 15 years. So we have developed the second largest startup ecosystem in the world, right? So the average age of the founders is 28. That means they are very young people like yourselves. Very encouraging to see that 9% of them are women entrepreneurs. This percentage has gone 100% in the last 1 year. Okay. So you can see that the $50 billion valuation is something that we already have for the startups. 20,000 plus startups that we have. There are 200 plus incubators, including the one that we have at IMT Ghaziabad that contribute to the startup ecosystem in terms of mentoring and nurturing entrepreneurs at their startup stage. And they have received over $9.5 billion in funding since January 2016. So this has caused a lot of people to now believe that entrepreneurship should happen and can happen within this country. So, today it is a good thing for a person to come out and say that, I'm pursuing my entrepreneurial dream. At one point of time, that sort of a social recognition was not there, wherein a lot of people who became entrepreneurs and developed startups were not really considered in the same sort of spectrum as maybe the top corporate leaders. But today the situation is changing. Entrepreneurship is widely accepted, as a great way to make one's mark. And what has been our impact? So we have created, the startup ecosystem has created over 7 lakh jobs. And the best part of it is that 373 plus million plus rural internet users have been incorporated into this particular ecosystem, and that is aided by the 61% internet penetration. So if you see that we have a lot of positivity that has happened within the Indian startup ecosystem in the last decade or so. But my questions are a little bit beyond that. So that's great. But is the Indian startup story only a couple of decades old? How were businesses created before that? Did we not have startups before that? So where are these startups now? And what adversities did the old startups face? So these are some of the questions that I like to ask myself. And, I would like to ask you as well. So do you think the startup story of India is just a couple of decades old when startup became the cool thing to do? Or did we have this sort of entrepreneurship even before that? What are your thoughts?
Sir, can I go?
Yeah, please go ahead, Vedant.
Yeah. So, sir, I feel that, like you mentioned, the startups that are micro ventures or small ventures, those are also startups in a sense, but they were not formally recognized before until a few years ago. So I feel those were also startups, and India had a lot of startups before, like a couple of decades before also, but they were not formally recognized. So therefore, they did not come into the mainstream media or the mainstream picture. So I feel that we already had a startups before that.
Absolutely. So the micro businesses that you see flourishing everywhere, they are indeed a story that of startups that India had much before we really started talking about startups in the modern sense of the word. Thank you, Vedant. Anybody else has a different perspective? Yeah, please go ahead.
Actually, what I have seen that businesses and startups already existed before in with other things, and I think the main challenge for them was that they lacked guidance and proper allocation of resources. Like everyone knew that yeah, they have to start something, but they don't know whom to reach out to and where to collect the resources and everything. And now it's much easier because there's so much awareness about everything, and then we have incubators and all to whom we can reach out to, and from there we can get mentors and everything. So yeah, businesses and startups, all these things existed, and they have revolutionized now. So that's it.
Excellent point, Nandika. So you are very right. And what has really happened now, and which is different to what used to happen before, is how enterprises are created and supported has changed. So if we go back a few decades ago, right, most of the startups, if you may like, were family driven. Would you agree to that?
Yes, sir, definitely.
Yes. So they were started by one member of the family or multiple members of the same family, but they were essentially startups. I mean, why are we calling them something else? Somebody did start up, somebody did see an opportunity, somebody did have a need for achievement, and they did start a business. It's just that it was not contextualized in the modern way as we do it today. So you're very right when you say today, if you want to start up, your access to capital is much more easier. You have a steady flow of information coming to you in the forms of advanced data analytics and big data. You have supportive ecosystem in terms of incubators, accelerators, mentors, right? And the government policy as well has become very much conducive to developing new startups, right? So this was, however, different to before, right? And that is what I would like to just talk about. So one form of entrepreneurship that has always happened in India is in the family business context, which existed for centuries, right? Right from the pre-colonial period, wherein most of the startups, if you may like, were trading startups, and agri-based. Whereas in the colonial period during the British Empire, we saw technology take shape, wherein there was construction of railways, more technology coming in terms of mining of coal and developing of the mills that allowed us to develop, one of the develop and become one of the greatest suppliers of jute across the world and cotton across the world. And it continued after independence period, but here there was a problem. So during the license Raj, there were some constraints faced by these startups. So just as you said, that they did not have the access to capital as we do today. A lot of people did not have the expertise to mentor other people who wanted to start their business. And thirdly, the policies of the government were anti-startup in the sense that's the reason why it's called a license Raj, because if you wanted to start a business, you need to have a license. So for time immemorial, Bajaj was the only person who was licensed to manufacture scooters. The only two cars that you could buy were Ambassador and Fiat because they were the only ones who had license. If you wanted to start a business, it was very much likely that your success depended on the babu sitting in the office, the government office, and the minister, rather than your own idea and the brilliance behind your own idea. So it was a nexus between politicians and established business persons that gave the license Raj its fuel. So everybody who had the license and access to the government resources, they could do well. And what happened between after that was that we had a Jugad Raj. That means a lot of financial scams taking place. The nexus between politicians that was developed during the license Raj now really started taking effect because a lot of people who had these networks now started developing Jugad-based businesses, right? So you really did not have to have a great idea, but if you somehow can get your work done from the right people, then you could start get into business. It was only after liberalization of the economy that we saw in 1992 that the market opened up, and so did the competition. Money started to flow in from foreign countries, and in India, the license Raj was abolished. You could go and start your own business. Entrepreneurship efforts were promoted among the youth. So a lot of these changes happened. And the reason why I'm talking about this is each one of these periods, entrepreneurship did exist. It's just that it existed in different shapes and forms depending on different context that is presented in the right-hand side of this table. So what was different? The problems of the old versus new. So in the olden times, the family enterprises, as was said, they lacked access to finance. They lacked infrastructure, so they could not transport goods over large distances as effectively as we can do today. The distribution infrastructure was not that good. The IT infrastructure was not that good. So you could not do business the way we can do today. The third point was there was a lack of trained or skilled human resources. So today, because of the number of engineering institutions and STEM-based institutions and other educational institutes that have mushroomed in India, today availability of trained and skilled human resources is much better than what it was in the past. There was also a lack of formal education. So not many people who actually got into business were formally educated for that, right? And the question was always about short-term survival. It was very important for businesses at that time to survive in the short term because there was a lot of, because of the lack of financial support and the policy support, a lot of them collapsed under their own weight. Whereas, what are the problems of the startups of today? In fact, you'll see that they are exactly the opposite of what was happening in the past. So one is, in the past, we had lack of technology. Today, startups are facing the problem due to the complexity of technology. That means technology is disrupting what they're doing more and more every day. So one period of time, you had the lack of technology as a constraint. Today, you have excess technology as a constraint, right? Second is, while talent in the past was unavailable, today, retaining that talent is becoming a big issue for startups, right? And in the past, competition was very less because obviously, license Raj, very few families who had the connect could get into business. But today, competition is excessive. And that is also becoming a problem for startups because they're competing with people who have more and more similarity in terms of resources. And when I say resources, particularly the financial resources. And while short-term survival was a problem in the past, today it is the long-term growth. I mean, think about the number of startups that actually exit or are acquired or merge, right? How many Indian startups have really lived through a long product cycle or a long industry cycle? So long-term growth and profitability is becoming a problem for the modern startups. So you see, the problems are related to the same aspects of business, but they are different. In fact, quite opposite to what has happened in the past and what is happening now. But let me tell you what was different. Before we understand what is entrepreneurship, we need to understand that, look, entrepreneurship, the reason why it does not have a universal definition, as I said in the beginning, it lacks a universal definition, is because entrepreneurship is a lot more social than you think. It is about people, right? So here, the context of the geography or the culture in which entrepreneurship takes place is also very important. So here, let me just spend some time in order to try and separate out how does the Western form of entrepreneurship differ from Indian forms of entrepreneurship. So while in the West, because entrepreneurship as a subject was developed in the West, right? And they developed it based on what they saw happen in Silicon Valley. So a lot of this startup entrepreneurship literature that is coming in books today is coming from cases that happened in, Western America, in the startup belt. So is that relevant to us, or is it not relevant to us? Should we just accept whatever they're telling us as it is, or should we actually delve into our own context, understand our own context better, and then we might be better off in terms of pursuing entrepreneurship? So just to give you a little bit of background, so the Indian conceptualization, I've called it ethnic conceptualization because in India, mainly it is the ethnic business communities that actually flourished in entrepreneurship. So in India, we saw that a lot of these business communities work on an affiliation mode. That means it's about a collectivist way of achieving success. It was about group behavior. Whereas in the West, entrepreneurship is a lonely endeavor. It is very much individualistic. It is about one person making the difference, right? So the other thing is, in India, our logic of doing business is based on controlling our available resources. That means it is affordable loss based. That means I'm going to invest into my business only as much as I can afford to lose. Whereas in the West, the philosophy of business was always about predicting the expected gains and then doing business based on expected returns, right? So here you have one logic, which is control. That means I'll try to control my existing resources so that I can, if I do lose, I can lose what is affordable. And the other is I don't care about how whether I can afford to lose or not. I'll try to predict my gains, and then according to that, whatever investment is required, I will do. So now here I would like to talk about the risk taking that we were talking about earlier. Which one of these two is, do you think, a more risky approach and a risk averse approach?
Western is the
Western.
So you see where that entire conceptualization of entrepreneurs as heroic risk takers came from. It came from the West. Yeah, Shreyansh.
Yeah, ethnic would be risk averse, and Western would be more risk taking.
Very much. So this is what we found out. So during my doctoral studies, basically, my study was based on 25 family businesses, which went through a hyper-growth stage. When I say hyper-growth, that means they were 1,000 crore turnover businesses 10 years ago, and within 10 years, they became around 10,000 crores in terms of turnover. And these were multi-generational family businesses. So the grandfather, father, and the son, all three of them had seen the business through. And these were all large companies. They have now, no longer being called family businesses because they have turned into corporations, a couple of them with IPOs as well. So one thing that I understood while talking to them was they always talked about affordable loss strategy. So they were not, averse to risk. They said, if I take, let's say if there is a property worth $100 million that you need to invest in, okay? He says, I first calculate what is affordable that I can lose. So let's say I come up to a figure that I can afford to lose $25 million, right? So his approach is, I need to control my loss. If I lose this $25 million, I'm okay. I won't be like bankrupt or my business won't suffer. So what I'll do is, I'll try to find 2 or 3 more like-minded stakeholders who will invest the rest of the money. So this is a very partnership-based business. You see, that's why I call it an affiliation, collectivist. So they will find someone from their network or community who will invest the rest of the money. So the risk is spread. Now, collectively, they are going for something much bigger, $100 million project, which individually none of them can afford. But they are not caring about individual need for achievement. For them, it's fine if a couple of more people make money with them as well. On the other hand, the Western thought is that I am not going to start by calculating how much I can afford to lose. I will calculate how much I have a tendency to gain if my calculations are right. So if I can gain, let's say, $500 million in 5 years, and for that, if I need to invest $200 million today, I will invest those $200 million. And the problem with that often is that if things go wrong, because we live in a VUCA environment, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So if things go wrong and if your calculations of predictions go wrong, because prediction is always future-based and you can only predict the future, you can never, sort of be sure about it. So if things go wrong, I have taken a $200 million loan or raised money from VC or, angel investor, wherever. I am, I've taken a great risk. If it pays off, fine, great. If it does not pay off, I am in a problem. I'm in an existential issue now. So that is the significant difference in terms of the risk-taking mindset of traditional Indian businesses, which are, and foreign startups. And the other thing that I would like to really talk about is the available means versus goals. So if you see, if I have to predict something, or a lot of the Western concept of business, or philosophy of businesses, they start with goals about what I want to achieve. Okay. So the problem is that in the past, when competition was not as much as it is today, when business was a little bit more less complex, technology was not as disruptive it was today. You could, to a certain extent, set a goal and then go on to achieve it, right? So that was fine. But the problem with that is happening with this goal orientation today is that because of the uncertainty in the environment, which is higher in its degree compared to the past, the chances of things going wrong are more. So, for example, so before I joined IMT Ghaziabad, I spent 10 years in the UK, in various universities and academic capacities. And I was based in Wales during the start of my career. And there I happened to work with a body called the Welsh Automotive Forum. So these were mainly people who made automotive components, okay? And they used to supply to Europe because most of the major automotive manufacturers were based in Europe, except Jaguar Land Rover, which was British based. So over the time, they wanted to actually capture the European market, these suppliers. Now, what happened was I worked with them for a period of 5 years. And what happened during those 5 years is Brexit happened. I'm sure you all are all aware of that. Now, Brexit was such a thing that nobody was sure about whether it would happen or not, because the politicians were, fluffing about it. There was mixed reactions in the market. The papers were not really telling you anything clear. So none of these traders actually felt that, oh, you know what, Brexit won't happen. Europe is too important a market for us. But then Brexit did happen. And their goal orientation that, I want to capture the European market actually was left in tatters, because the uncertainty that happened in the political context of that country actually threw that plan into the air. Now, the opposite way of doing that is what we observed in the Indian businesses. So when I was studying Indian businesses, we saw that they don't start with goals. They start with their available means. And what their available means are is who am I, what I know, and whom I know. So they will try to use their available means in order to do whatever is possible at that particular time. So that would be your starting point in terms of whatever is available to you. Can I maximize it to achieve something? So he is not having a concrete goal set for himself or herself. What they're doing is they are controlling the outcome. So rather than setting one goal and then trying to experiment a lot of things in order to achieve that goal, you actually experiment a lot, in terms of whatever my goal can be. I don't know. I don't want to predetermine my goal. Why do I set my limit on success? I'll try to maximize whatever I have today in the best possible way that is possible in the present, rather than predicting the future. So in the West, your focus is on the goal, whereas in Indian business, we notice that their focus is on the process of doing something right today. And that is the major difference between the Western startup-oriented entrepreneurship that we saw in the West and the Indian entrepreneurship, which was mainly family business-driven, that we saw in India. So, however, family businesses are slightly different. Yeah, please go on.
Sir, I want to ask one question.
Yeah.
That then, sir, which is better, that what I know in Indian context, or what I want to do of foreign context?
You know what,
business in the world prosper better?
Absolutely good question. The point is that there is no right or wrong, because this is not, just like in strategy, there is no right or wrong. Your plan can be worked to perfection but implemented incorrectly. So no matter how good a plan, it will fail, right? So the same way, there is no fixed formula. There are some functional areas of business wherein there are fixed formulas. Like, for example, in operations management, in financial management, even to that extent in marketing management, there are fixed set of laws. But in strategy or entrepreneurship, there are no fixed laws. There is no book that tells you that, you follow this prescription and it sort of guarantees you success. What, however, happens in entrepreneurship is that a lot of people have to understand that we need to do what is right in our context. Your context might actually be more oriented towards, let's say, an affordable loss approach. So then you should do that. You should not just be swayed by the Western concept and say, no, I'm going to follow a predictive logic. Whereas in the West, if your context is more supportive towards prediction, because let's say, in the West, capital, cost of capital is so low, you can get loans on 1.52% interest. So if their capital availability and cost of capital is not very high, then maybe predictive logic suits you better. Who knows? So it is very important to do entrepreneurship within your own context. So that process of entrepreneurship starts by trying to formulate your context. That is what I'm trying to say. Is that clear to you?
So, sir, Western are also doing what we Indians used to do, because
Yes.
we Indians are thinking what we have, and in Western context, their idea is that their interest loan percent is less. So they are also thinking of what they have in the now, and hence they're thinking of the future. But we are,
Very
because our
good.
loans
Yes, indeed.
rates are high. That's why we are thinking of the now.
See, they are learning from us and we are learning from them. So, for example, I'm going to talk a little bit about, let's say, this. Okay, I'm going to advance to it. So, if you can see, this is causal versus effectual reasoning. Okay. So, effectual reasoning is what I just talked about, the Indian way of doing things, and causal is the Western way of doing things. So, here, the essential difference now that is happening is the theory of effectuation, which I'm going to talk about, was developed in the University of Virginia by an Indian lady, okay, who studied Indian businesses. But she also observed similar effectual tendencies among businesses in the West, including eBay, because eBay was one of her, case study. Now, and in India, we are seeing that a lot of successful unicorns are actually demonstrating the Western causal way of thinking, right? And that is working for them. So, what we need to understand is, see, we as students, we need to appreciate the different forms of entrepreneurship and the different logics and philosophies that are out there. So our job is to have an understanding of all of it, so that when it comes, when the time comes for me to do it, I can choose from a wide variety of perspectives. I can choose as to what suits my context. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. Jugal, you have a question?
So can we really call these unicorns successful? Because they're not like most of the unicorns are not profit making. They're just they're just capitalizing on the markets, and that's it. Like they're still loss making. So can we really call them successful?
Yeah. So that is again subjective. I mean, today in India we are only talking about valuation, right? And like even if you take Zomato's case, for example, what happened to their stock prices over the last 1 year? It's shocking. But and if you read the Economic Times for the last 2 weeks, I think on the front page of the Economic Times or on the third or fourth page, always you are getting a news item wherein all the different valuation bodies are actually cutting the valuation of a lot of Indian startups. Oyo is cut less than half. Ola is cut less than half. So why is that happening? Yeah, Byju's. I mean, don't even get me started on Byju's. Yes, crazy. So you're right that, should we really call this success? But in the West, yes, valuation is success, right? If you can create a good valuation, that is success. But in India, the reason why we are actually questioning that valuation model is because in India, your business was always about, are you profitable or not? Profitability was given more important than valuation. So you look at how Indian businesses see. For example, let's look at Tata. Okay, one of the most storied Indian conglomerates. For them, it is profitability that is more important, right? Rather than what is the valuation. So they come from the Indian businesses come from a mindset that it is important to become profitable. But because the startups are actually it's more informed by the Western thought process. That is why we are talking about valuation in India as well now. And one thing I would recommend you do, Jugal, is that if you want to know more about this, there's a video on valuation on YouTube by Dr. Ashwath Damodaran of the New York University. I would really, request you to view that, because that'll give you a great knowledge about how valuation is actually done and how actually it should be done. Okay. Yeah. So Varun, next question.
Hello. Yeah. So we were talking about how there are goals and that predictive nature in the Western concept of entrepreneurship, and then there comes the external factors that can kind of you know. Supplement or subside our goals and change the way we are thinking. So, isn't that the place where innovation and problem solving is the most required? Like the
Very
two
much. Very much.
entrepreneurial things. So, like instead of thinking about how we can be within our means, if we like having a good goal and achieving that goal is important at any cost. So, I mean, like we should take calculated risks. That's fine, but taking risks is important, and sometimes it fails. But then that's what a true entrepreneur would do, right? They would try to solve the problem instead of.
Absolutely. See, what you're trying to say is that, what we are trying to say basically is that there is no right or wrong. I mean, there are lots of stories about entrepreneurs actually taking insane amount of risk and actually succeeding. Okay. But
Right.
see, but this risk has to be calculated. It has to be, like, for example, if Jeff Bezos once gave an interview for the Fortune magazine, and he said that, I base my decisions based on 70% information. Okay. Because he's like, getting 100% right information to make a decision is a myth. It does not happen. And if you do wait for 100% information to come, your competitors take that decision before you, and you are anyways, it's null and void, right? So, and that was very similar to what was observed in Indian businesses. So I don't know whether there is a very famous practice in India, and it is basically done by the Gujaratis and Marwadis in India. They call it mota moti hisab. Okay, so that is nothing but a theory of approximation. Okay, so here what they do is very much the same thing that Jeff Bezos was talking about. That I want to know more or less, is my decision going to pan out good or not? I'm not going to be waiting to be 100% sure about it. Okay, so the point is saying that this is the only way to do it and that is the wrong way to do it. Our form of entrepreneurship should be that we are open to all ways. We need to be appreciative of all ways and select the best way forward at that moment for us in that particular context. So, for example, that today, if for a startup, when you're, let's say, in your infancy as a startup, you might want to, which financial number constitutes a high risk for you may be different to what it might be 5 years down the line, right? So your situation changes, your context changes. So the decision and the decision making philosophy should be as per what is warranted in that moment, rather than just following a textbook or following somebody else's success story. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I can understand.
Okay, fantastic. I saw Zico had his hand up. So if Zico, you would like to ask a question. Okay, I don't think Zico is here with us anymore. All right, let's just move on. Okay, so this is entrepreneurship in the
No, sir, I was here. Actually, I had a question, but you answered it in the meanwhile.
I answered it. Fantastic, great. So we've talked about startups. We've talked about family businesses. Okay, now let's talk about what happens in the corporate environment. So the main thing that we understand is that there is a managerial way of thinking and there's an entrepreneurial way of thinking. And this is what my research was based on. So what is the managerial way of thinking? The managerial way of thinking is that I am going to select between different given means of, to achieve a predetermined goal. That is what is the Western form of entrepreneurship that we talked about. There is a given goal and you're going to select between the different means available to you in order to achieve that goal. Now, if you see, the other form of thinking is the entrepreneurial thinking, which is more effectual. That means instead of setting a predetermined goal, I'm going to use different imaginations of how I can use my given means in order to lead to any one of the goal outcomes. Okay, so here the goal is not set. Here, the theory is that let me not set a goal, because the goal might not be the most optimal thing for me to do or the right thing for me to do. Rather, what I'll do is I'll see whatever is possible for me to do in my available means and just see what is the outcome. So this kind of entrepreneurial thinking is more comfortable with uncertainty. It's more comfortable with volatility in the markets. It's more comfortable with complexity that comes with disruption, because you have no preset goal. You are more agile and you're more accommodative and you're more adaptive, which allows you to pilot in the plane, almost create a new outcome rather than just try and control and navigate your way to one given goal. So that is the major shift in thinking that corporates are expecting to happen. So this is what I talk about when I talk about corporate entrepreneurship. So people today, when recruiters come to us, they always ask us that we need people with an entrepreneurial mindset. So what they really need is they need people who can work with the given means. They don't want people who will keep asking for more and more means and then chase a goal which is predetermined, which may not be achievable down the line. Rather, they want people who can work with the given means and try and come up with an opportunity. Try and see the gaps within the organizations. What is not happening properly? Can you take initiative and make it right? What is something that we are overlooking? There might be a customer segment we are overlooking. There might be a product segment we are overlooking. Can you take initiative and actually develop a plan and actually implement it? They want people who are open in sharing of ideas. They are out of the box thinkers. They are open to collaborate. So they want people who can be proactive in terms of identifying which means can be used to determine an outcome. They want people who are then going to take initiative to do something about it, not just submit a proposal, but do something about it. Third, they want people who will collaboratively do it, not by working in silos. These people will work collaboratively across cross-functional teams to make something happen within a corporate organization. So it is possible. For example, when we say corporate entrepreneurship, there are different types of corporate entrepreneurship. There is something called as entrepreneurship. That means companies aim to turn their employees into entrepreneurs, allowing the innovations to happen within the company. The other form is corporate venturing. That means the organization allows you to create a new business within the business, that is different from the original business. Or they are looking for organizational transformers. That means somebody who is good at innovation and reorganization of resources that leads to new business opportunities. Or they're looking for people who can bend the rules of the industry. That means they try to change the rules in which the market has happened. Like, for example, if you look at the modern startups that have come, one I can talk about is Zerodha. They have to a certain extent changed the way the market, trading market is actually, traditionally functioned. We've seen the same thing that is done by Paytm, with the UPI, right? Wherein they've completely changed the way how transactions happen between vendors and customers. So what companies that come to recruit with us are looking for are people who are motivated to take entrepreneurial initiatives within organizations. So whether you want your intent is to actually start up, whether your intent is to go back and join your family business, whether your intent is to go and be an entrepreneur within a large corporation as an entrepreneur, it's all important. It is very important to understand the journey of entrepreneurship. And and some of the things I talked about, come on, let's be honest, we are in a pre-foundation. So that is a very strange combination of words, because foundation is supposed to be the starting point, and then we have a pre-foundation, which is like the foundation of the foundation. So there are a lot of things that I haven't talked about, which we will talk about in detail during the course of the program, and which will give you a more holistic understanding of what were some of the things that we were talking about today. So we will actually pull on those threads and go more deeper in each one of those, right? And a lot of the questions, a lot of intelligent questions that came to us today, as to why is this, or is this the only way, or that. So I think that journey that we will undertake together throughout the course will allow you to develop your own answers to those questions. So what happens at IMT Ghaziabad as far as entrepreneurship is concerned? See, entrepreneurship is taught in three types. Okay, first is about entrepreneurship, second is for entrepreneurship, and third is through entrepreneurship. So first is about entrepreneurship. You will have courses which will give you knowledge about a certain topic. So while it is important to study entrepreneurship, but for an entrepreneur it's very important to have good knowledge about marketing, finance, operations, human resource management, strategy, all of that. So your first job is to gain knowledge of different topics. It happens via lectures in the classroom, yeah, through the academic curriculum. So that is learning about entrepreneurship. The second journey is then for entrepreneurship. That means after you gain knowledge of those topics, how can you become more entrepreneurial? So this happens via experiential learning. So we do a lot of workshops of entrepreneurship and new venture creation, design thinking. You can get involved in live projects or business case competitions. So here it is about developing and preparing for entrepreneurial actions that you will take in the future. So this is where you can fail in a safe environment. You can try innovative stuff in a controlled environment and test some of your abilities to become an entrepreneur in whichever context you may like. And the last part is through entrepreneurship. That means the focus is on practical application of entrepreneurial activity. That means you can join the incubation center here at IMT Ghaziabad, who will have tons of events happening throughout the year. There will be VC, led events. There will be mentoring sessions, a lot of those things. So there you can actually start putting your ideas into action, develop your business plan, lean model canvas, get similar like-minded mentors who have done business in the area that you want to do, and see how you can then actually fructify your ideas. So that's how entrepreneurship is. The journey of entrepreneurship happens at IMT Ghaziabad. So what is important is, are you ready to actually accept that? Because entrepreneurship sits on the side of a lot of other things that you will study. You will study a lot of functional knowledge-based subjects during your course at IMT Ghaziabad. But what is important is, can you use the knowledge of entrepreneurship then to capitalize on the other functional area knowledge so that you can go and make a difference in your family business, or you can make a difference in the company that you will be recruited into, or you can even take up a startup journey via incubator. So the choice is up to you. The support is there from us. So with that, I'll just like to stop. We are 3 minutes past 6 o'clock. So yeah, we have crossed the time, but not too much. Are there any questions at this point?
Yes, sir. I had one question.
Sure.
Regarding the US mindset and the Indian mindset of entrepreneurship, sir, in the US mindset, you said that it's more goal oriented. Sir, I feel that if the in that case, sir, there is more chance for what you could say unethical behavior on the part of an entrepreneur. Like, for example, I saw this a series based on Travis Kalanick, the Uber guy, and the way he was behaving, because he wanted to decimate his competition. He wanted complete market share, so he refused to, deal with a proper offer to buy lift his competition. So I feel that comes from that sort of predatory goal oriented mindset. So don't you feel that we should try to curb that in at least the Indian entrepreneurs?
No, you're absolutely right, and that's a fascinating point that you brought up, that, yes, it can lead to unethical tendencies. But then in India also, we have seen, people with the exact Indian mindset go on and do unethical things. I mean, how many of the Indian entrepreneurs are today actually that, people that we are chasing? So it can happen in any way. So again, it's about, trying to do the right thing at the right moment. So if at that time, if they had behaved ethically, but if it was against their goal chasing sort of mindset, perhaps they could have had a different outcome. But that is the same thing that the effectual reasoning says, that at that time you don't just work based on one set goal. Try and do something, evaluate the other opportunities available to you, and try to maximize your means in terms of those opportunities. So when it comes to unethical work, it can happen in any context. I don't think it is country specific. But yes, sometimes that predatory goal orientation that you talked about, it can lead to those kind of tendencies. So there you're very right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Arish?
Yes, so good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So my question is, besides the number of people working in an organization, what is the difference between a startup and a corporation?
That's a very good question, and that actually brings me to a slide that I actually stopped, I skipped. So this is the development phase, okay, of a startup. All right. There is a pre-startup stage wherein the vision and mission of the startup is defined. Then they develop a minimum viable product. It launches into the market. They try to experiment on product market fit, and then they scale. So there is a pre-startup stage, and a growth stage. Now, let me ask you this question, Arish. Do you think that this journey is different for a large corporation and a startup, or is the journey very similar?
I feel that the journey is very similar.
Very good. And that is the thing, that the journeys of see, a lot of the corporations that you see today were actually startups at one point of time. Starbucks was a startup. Microsoft was a startup. Gap was a startup, right? So they all became corporations when they successfully achieved scale at the growth stage, right? So in terms of a startup and a large corporation, the difference, if you ask me, is they are at different ends of this cycle. One has successfully validated their products and services, and they have scaled it up, and now they are trying to bring in new products or services, whereas a startup spends a lot of its time in getting the right product and trying to find the product market fit. That is where the major difference lies. But as far as businesses are concerned, whether you're a large corporation, whether you're a family business, or whether you're a startup, your journey which you see on the screen is not too different. Okay, your context might be different. So, like for example, a large corporation at growth stage, they find it difficult to act like a startup. They find it difficult to adapt to new technologies. They find it difficult to adapt to market disruptions. The reason because is they have grown. It's like an elephant. It's difficult to turn it, whereas startups are in a much better position to react to it. So it is the timing of their cycle of business cycle that is different rather than anything else.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Akshit?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Regarding the sort of business mindset that people have in India, one based on profitability rather than valuation, do you think that model is more sustainable for business?
I mean, it's not sustainable in the long run, is it? Akshit, because look, whoever the investors might be, I mean, how deep can your pockets go? At some point of time, you are going to want, good returns on your investment. So at that time, you're going to chase the startup for profitability, because that's the only way the shareholders' wealth can be maximized, isn't it? Valuation is nothing. Valuation is just like a bubble, like stock market bubbles that we create. It's there, but it's all perception based. It's not reality based. So in the long run, this chasing of valuation is not very good. It's all a great story to tell that my startup is valuated at this amount of dollars, and that shows some of your credibility in terms of raising of money. But then somebody was talking about Byju's. I mean, everybody thought Byju's would really crack the market, and not only in India, but actually the other markets successfully they would crack would be Africa. Whereas their story has turned out to be something else. They've not really realized the kind of levels that they set for themselves through their initial valuation. So it's not sustainable. I don't think so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Siddhant?
Sir, I have one question that if I have an idea right now, so sir, should I execute it by thinking how to execute it, or should I think of the future, that whether it has pros and cons? Because I think that I want to create something new, and should I just go and create it, or should I think that it will affect how it will affect the environment, or how it will affect the people, or how will it help the people? Should I think about that, or just create my idea?
See, idea is the initial stage. of your journey, right? The first thing is to get an idea about something. So in our incubation center, what we do is people come up with a lot of ideas, but when we actually start testing the idea, that is the time a lot of the ideas fall apart because they have been done before, or they do not stand the test of the test that we put it through. So idea is very good because you've come up with something. The second step is to test the idea. Okay, let people ask you hard questions. That, okay, what kind of financial commitment would you need for this? Have you really got a good understanding of the market? Have you really got a good understanding of your customer? Have you really got an understanding of what are the competitors for you looking like? What are the potential substitute to the products and services that you might bring into the market? And how what is going to be your business model? That means how you're going to earn your revenue, what is going to be your profit proposition, people proposition, value proposition. A lot of things that have to be researched so before you put that idea into action. So one thing that you can do is, see, I am really the kind of a person who thinks that the idea should not wait for anyone, but at the same time it's very sad if the idea is not tested right at the very beginning and we allow it to go into the market and then fail. So if you do join us, what I would really appreciate you do is that you contact the incubation center, discuss your idea with them, and start going through that incubation process. So you'll get a lot of feedback, a lot of critique of that idea. And then if the idea stands the test of time, then the incubation center will actually give you the resources to go and start that business.
Sir, that is what I was asking, that whatever you said were the hard questions about finance or about profit or about people, how will it affect? So, sir, because I have heard about some scientist that who has created stuff like Edison has created bulb, but he has not thought of how his business will start, because he just invented something and then the business prospered by itself by seeing how people are reacting to it, and he created a business out of it from his own, like you said, in Indian context, what he knows and who are his people. So, sir, should I just start creating, start executing and make the product and then see how the market feels about it, or just
So you
first
will
ask the idea?
you will have to first get a deep understanding of whether there is acceptability of your product within the market. So you can create a minimum viable product. Okay, so what you're telling about what Edison did, he did have a minimum viable product, right? So, but how do you create a minimum viable product? That is when you actually have to do design thinking. So you have to identify the user for your product. You have to identify the need, the problem statement, and then you have to get insights from them, which will then use to be ideating different solutions, the different potential solutions that might actually go on to solve that problem. So your minimum viable product, number one, that you come up with might solve the problem, but not in the best possible way. So that minimum viable product might have to go a lot of iterations of improvement, right? So it is very important to go through this process first before you reach execution. Execution comes later. Once you have tested your idea and your product and its minimum viability, then comes the execution part. Does that help you?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Love, if you want to ask a question.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, in our early ages, we have, heard about these three words: primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector. So I believe the latest entrepreneurs are revolving around the tertiary sectors. But I want to focus on the primary sector, like the manufacturing sector. So can you say anything, or what's your viewpoint upon the primary sector if anyone wants to become an entrepreneur in that sector?
Absolutely, it's possible. I mean, the opportunities, as you rightly said, are more in the tertiary sector, because people tend to think that a lot of problems of the primary sector have already been solved, but no, they are not. So, for example, you might come up with a product that helps manufacturing sectors improve their efficiencies. You can come up with that kind of a product, or you might come up with a solution for automation that actually helps them produce a product more faster. Or you might actually get into manufacturing, like a lot of people are doing nowadays. Ever since the EV revolution started taking place in India, a lot of SMEs are now investing money into developing EV infrastructure. They are manufacturing automotive components for EVs. So as the tertiary markets develop, they invariably create an opportunity in the primary sector. If you backward sort of engineer it, then you will see that suppose a EV vehicle industry is happening, then there are opportunities in the supply chain, opportunities in the value chain, whether as a automotive component maker or whatever. There are always opportunities coming up. Even in steel, a sector which is like ages old. There also right now, for example, Tata is investing a lot of money in material sciences, wherein they are trying to come up with new materials, right? So there, a lot of startups are working in that space. A lot of startups are working in the space sector, trying to enable the space sector. So yes, the opportunities can be there, and
yes, sir, that's what my point was. That iron and steel and space, these involve a huge cost or investment, or they take up a huge money to step in. So what one should go through, like should they start with a small thing, then grow it into a big thing, or they should take a leap of faith and step into it and make their decision, work upon it according to the
So
business
the first step is always to start small, isn't it? I mean, first you come up with a solution. So you'll need to have a minimum viable product or a business model that you actually go in the market and see whether there is acceptability for it. So that is the stage that you start with first. So there is a lot of research involved. We in strategy we call it the environment analysis. So we always try to see whether what are the industry attractiveness like. So what are the threat of substitutes? What are the threat of new entrants? What is the bargaining power of suppliers? What is the bargaining power of buyers? What is the competitive rivalry like over there? So we look at all these things, in order to understand whether a particular industry is attractive to get into or not. And based on that, the commitment then should happen. So that is the process that you'll have to go through.
Okay, sir. So is there any that you mentioned the artificial incubation cell or incubation atmosphere situation where we can test our product?
Yes. So for example, we have an incubation center over here, but we do have a tie-up with IIIT Delhi, wherein they are an engineering-oriented incubator. So if it's a technical product or something like that, we have access to use their labs, wherein you can go and test it.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right. So thank you very much. It's 6:15, so I'll have to stop at this point. I hope this was not everything about entrepreneurship, but